Welcome to Debt Matters. Imagine sitting on a sinking ship, looking at a fully inflated lifeboat right next to you. But, well, you aren't allowed to board because the crew hasn't finished printing the privacy waivers.
Right, which sounds completely absurd when you put it like that.
It does. But, that is exactly what is happening right now with 500 million pounds of unreleased energy relief in the UK. We are going to connect the dots on a major warning sign currently flashing over the UK economy, which is consumer energy debt.
Yeah, and it's a situation that impacts households, credit control teams, and really the broader machinery of the economy in ways that aren't immediately obvious when you just glance at a monthly utility bill.
Exactly. So let's just lay out the core facts right at the start for you. Currently, UK consumer energy debt sits at around 5.5 billion pounds.
Which is just a massive number.
Right. And the trajectory is what we really need to focus on. Because if no action is taken, that figure is projected to hit 7 billion pounds by the end of the year.
Yeah, 7 billion.
So the real question we have to ask ourselves here is, what actually happens to households, to credit control teams, and to the wider economy when utility bills reach a point where a vast number of people just simply cannot pay them?
Well, the numbers we are dealing with really require a complete rethink of how money is recovered. When you have billions of pounds sitting in the unpaid column of a ledger, it ceases to be a localized problem for the billing department.
It becomes a full-blown economic roadblock.
Exactly, because energy companies still have to buy wholesale energy to supply the grid, right? And they're often locking in those purchases months in advance.
Oh, right, of course.
So if the cash isn't coming in from consumers to cover those forward contracts, those suppliers suddenly face a massive liquidity crunch. It becomes a huge cash flow issue.
Okay, so to understand how we might actually hit that 7 billion pound mark, we first have to look at the immediate roadblock standing in the way of a solution, which goes back to that fully inflated lifeboat analogy I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the Promise Relief Scheme.
Exactly. There is a promised 500 million pound relief scheme designed specifically to clear debt for some of the poorest households in the country.
And the regulator, Ofgem, is ready to go. The funding concept exists.
But the launch is just completely stalled. It's stalled due to legislation and data sharing rules, which, honestly, wait, hold on. Let's unpack this for a second.
Sure.
The energy companies have the ledgers, right? They know exactly who owes them money, and they know exactly how much is owed. I mean, they send out the bills every month.
Yes, they do.
So why is data sharing such a complex bottleneck when the debt is already sitting right there on their own screens?
What's fascinating here is the gap between recognizing a problem and actually delivering the support. You see, under current privacy regulations and welfare frameworks, a citizen's tax bracket and their universal credit status are strictly siloed.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So, yes, the energy supplier knows exactly who owes the money, but they do not definitively know a customer's income level, their employment status, or if they qualify as one of the poorest households targeted by this specific relief scheme.
Because all that vulnerability in income data sits with government departments, like the Department for Work and Pensions.
Exactly. It comes down to strict legal silos governing privacy and how personal information is shared between the state and private corporations.
So the friction is basically the supplier has the debt data, the government has the vulnerability data, and they aren't legally allowed to just swap spreadsheets to figure out who needs the money.
Right. You can't just hand a corporate entity a list of citizens on welfare. It doesn't work like that.
Right. Privacy laws.
Yeah. To automatically apply relief, you need a secure legal pipeline where the government can essentially tell the energy companies to apply a credit to a specific list of accounts, but without exposing why those accounts were chosen.
Wow. So building that pipeline, I'm guessing that takes time.
It takes a lot of time. It requires a cryptographic blind match, or in some cases, literal legislative approval to bypass privacy rights. Policy and debt collections are so tightly connected here. A policy delay directly translates into an aging debt on a ledger.
And that delay isn't just an administrative headache for bureaucrats, because, the longer an energy bill sits unpaid, the more it infects every other area of a household's finances.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we all know the basic difference between priority and non-priority debt, right? You pay the electric bill before the credit card so you don't freeze.
Right, you prioritize keeping the lights on.
Yeah, but what happens when the priority debts themselves become fundamentally unaffordable?
Yeah.
The whole hierarchy of debt repayment completely breaks down. But I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
So what does this all actually mean for the average consumer? isn't an energy bill just one isolated expense? Like, why does falling behind on electricity suddenly mean a council tax or a credit card payment gets knocked over?
Well, it basically turns into a financial game of Jenga.
A game of Jenga.
Yeah, think about it. The household income is the foundation. When the energy block gets pulled out because costs have suddenly doubled, the consumer tries to plug the gap by, say, pulling the credit card block to pay for groceries.
Oh, right. Or they delay their rent or council tax.
Exactly. The tower doesn't fall immediately, but its structural integrity is completely compromised. The data shows unpaid energy bills do not exist in a vacuum. They are heavily linked to rent pressure, personal loans, and everyday living costs.
So if the energy block is pulled out, the entire structure is bearing weight it just wasn't designed to hold.
Which forces impossible choices.
Yeah.
When one priority bill becomes unaffordable, people start juggling. But eventually, the math catches up.
And I imagine for the wider economy, these rising arrears have a massive cascading impact.
Huge. They reduce consumer confidence. People who are trapped in a debt spiral are not spending money in the broader retail economy.
Right.
Plus, it puts immensely more pressure on public support schemes and local authorities. And, crucially, it creates widespread disputes between creditors and customers.
So if the government can't legally step in fast enough to clear this debt because of those privacy roadblocks, that really leaves only one group holding the bag, which is the energy companies' collections teams.
Yes! They are suddenly the frontline workers of a crisis they didn't even cause.
Right. And because this debt spirals so easily, the people tasked with recovering it have realized that their old methods will no longer work. Recovery is no longer just about aggressively chasing payment.
No, not at all. The old model of debt collection was incredibly linear and honestly quite blunt.
Like you miss a payment, you get an angry letter.
Pretty much. An automated letter was sent demanding the balance. If that didn't work, a firmer letter was sent, perhaps threatening legal action or utilizing a collection agency that operated on a commission basis.
Just constantly dialing up the pressure.
Right. Because the entire strategy relied on the assumption that the customer had the money but was simply choosing not to pay, and therefore needed to be pressured into compliance.
But the current £5.5 billion reality completely shatters that assumption. We are seeing a fundamental shift here. It's now fundamentally about understanding vulnerability, affordability, and repayment capacity.
Exactly. And there are three vital lessons collections teams are implementing right now. The first one is that early engagement matters. Timing is absolutely everything in debt recovery.
Because if you wait 90 days to send that first serious letter, the customer has probably already defaulted on everything else, right?
Exactly. Waiting until arrears are completely unmanageable heavily reduces the chance of ever recovering that money. In the past, a creditor might wait 3 or 4 months before really intervening.
Which is wild to think about now.
It is, because by that time, in today's economic climate, the customer is in a full-blown crisis and has likely stopped opening their mail altogether due to the psychological weight of the debt.
So reaching out early changes the dynamic.
It changes everything. Reaching out at the first missed payment, not with a threat, but with an offer to discuss the account or adjust the payment schedule, it changes the entire trajectory.
Because at that early stage, the hole isn't too deep to climb out of. If my bill is £100 and I miss 1 month, we can probably work that out. But if you wait until I owe £800,
You're going to panic.
yeah, I'm going to look at that number, realize I can never pay it, and completely disengage.
Which brings us directly to the second lesson. Affordability must be central to any recovery effort. A realistic repayment plan works far better than aggressive chasing.
Right.
It is a combination of basic mathematics and behavioral psychology. If a collections agent forces a struggling customer into agreeing to, say, a £150 a month repayment plan just to get them off the phone.
Or just to hit an internal metric.
Exactly. That plan is doomed. It might fail in week 1, and then the creditor is back to square one, but with a customer who now feels defeated and is far less likely to answer the phone the next time.
But if they agree to a £15 a month plan that the customer can actually sustain without sacrificing their grocery budget,
then the creditor gets consistent cash flow, the customer regains a sense of control over their finances, and the debt slowly depreciates.
so a realistic, affordable plan creates a reliable revenue stream, whereas an aggressive, unaffordable demand just creates a volatile, high-risk account that costs the company money to constantly chase.
Exactly.
You know, here's where it gets really compelling. Collections teams are having to pivot from being traditional debt chasers to acting more like financial triage nurses.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, they're assessing who needs critical care and who just needs a bandage. They're diagnosing the root cause of the non-payment rather than just treating the symptom.
But to be a good triage nurse, you need accurate vitals.
Right.
Which leads us to the third lesson. Data matters. Good information helps creditors know exactly who they're dealing with. They need to segment their portfolios not just by how much is owed, but by the financial reality of the person owing it.
So they're analyzing payment histories, usage patterns, and like any declared vulnerabilities.
Yes. They use that internal data to figure out who can pay but maybe just forgot, who wants to pay but needs a structured support plan, and who fundamentally cannot pay and needs an alternative recovery route entirely.
Like a hardship fund or government intervention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a creditor uses their internal data effectively, they can see those patterns clearly. Treating a vulnerable customer who has lost their job the same way you treat a business that is simply managing its cash flow poorly, it's bad business.
It just wastes resources on the wrong channels.
Right. Good data ensures that the right conversation happens with the right customer at the exact right time.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together for you. The UK's consumer energy debt is a massive cash flow issue for the suppliers. It is a severe cost of living crisis for the households caught in the middle of that Jenga tower. And it is a profound operational challenge for the collection teams trying to untangle the mess without, breaking the structural integrity of their customers' lives.
And this raises a critical question about the timeline we are on. As we march toward that £7 billion projection by the end of the year, the ultimate issue is whether structural support will arrive early enough.
Because time is running out.
It is. The longer people sit in that space of uncertainty, the more they fall into long-term arrears. And long-term arrears are notoriously much harder, much slower, and much more sensitive to recover.
The window for early intervention is just closing for a lot of households, while the administrative wheels slowly turn. Which actually brings us right back to that £500 million lifeboat sitting on the water, waiting for the passenger manifest.
Yeah, the stalled relief scheme.
Right. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've just discussed about the friction between government data and private ledgers. Is strict data sharing rules and privacy legislation are currently the main roadblocks preventing the government from wiping out £500 million in hardship debt? Well, at what point does our desire to protect personal data actually stand in the way of providing urgent financial rescue?
It's a tough question.
It really is. I mean, when the ship is taking on water, does the paperwork matter more than getting people into the lifeboats?
It is a delicate balance between privacy and protection, and right now, the scale is heavily tipped toward administrative caution at the expense of immediate relief.
Absolutely. Keep connecting the dots, and we will catch you next time.